All righty. We'd like to welcome everyone to tonight's RENNCAST Live. That video, I'm not sure, Zoom technology sometimes gets a little out of sync, so that video is out of sync. We'll re-edit that in there so you could see it, but it seemed like it was playing fine for me. Just want to welcome everybody to tonight's live RENNCAST with Jake Raving. We have a special guest, Sean Burke, and without any further ado, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Jake.
All right. Yeah.
How you
Thanks,
doing,
Bobby.
man?
Good. I guess you guys can hear me okay. So, yeah. So welcome, Sean. And thanks, Bobby, for getting this put together. Obviously, there's a lot of changes that have happened in the engine program. People don't understand what those changes are. But, basically at the end of the day, it doesn't matter anymore because we haven't sold an engine until Sean purchased this one in 1 year. So actually yesterday, February 1st, marked 1 year to the date since I kind of tagged the line on what we now call the old program. And we completely rejuvenated everything with the technical collaboration between Flat Six Innovations and LN Engineering. So they're selling our engines. Basically, it's a private label engine deal. And all the engines that we build here at Flat Six are going to be sold through LN. My general manager, Judd Fink, is going over to the LN side on March 1st to sell and support those engines. And this particular engine with Sean, the one he purchased, was the first one of the new program. So it was a bit of a milestone to have redeveloped the program. A lot of people think, oh, you did this to make more engines. No, we actually did this to make less engines. We did this to spend even more time on every engine and to take vehicles out of the equation because we've always, installed engines into cars here at Flat Six. But now that's not something we're doing. So last week we had Todd Lamb of Atlanta Speedworks on with us, and I was explaining the collaboration that we've got going on with him, where he basically took over our old installation facility and repair facility, and he's able to do all the work they do on their race cars, and also will be able to support the engine program here with Flat Six and LN as a super certified installer of these engines right in our old facility. So Sean went into this as part of a notification list. There's no wait list anymore. There's no deposits anymore. And basically, really the kind of the way it works is you contact us, you ask some questions about, hey, how much does this cost or whatever through the ticketing system. Judd gets back with you and says, this is kind of how things work. I'm going to send you an application. You fill out the application. Review panel looks at it, and either you get a tier 1, a tier 2, or a disqualification as far as the program goes. And yes, you can be disqualified based on if your car has a crazy amount of mileage, if you've got a big time failure, if there's something that is not basically going to match you up very well with the engine program, it's a disqualification. It just means that our program doesn't fit your car. It doesn't fit you, doesn't fit the car. We're sorry, but that's the way that it is. Tier 1 is basically where Sean was, where you get first chance at an engine when it's completed, and the first person that is able to pull the trigger once a hidden link goes live on the LN website for that particular engine, you get to buy it. So literally, you can be on a notification list, if you want to call it a wait list, for 1 day. You could be on a notification list for less than a day based on when you send in your application and when it gets qualified as tier 1 or tier 2. Now, a tier 2 purchaser, basically you have a less than favorable purchase condition. You've got an engine that's broken. You've got an engine that has more than 120,000 miles as a core. Basically you've got something that is not a stellar transaction. It's not a home run all the way around. So the way you may be able to purchase an engine with the LN Flat Six Innovations program is if all the guys on the tier 1 notification list don't purchase it, it goes to tier 2, and then tier 2 guys get a chance at it. So some of these engines may never make it to tier 2. I tell people that quite often, don't wait because you may not ever see one. It may not get listed. So this FSI 2737 was the first engine of the new program. It went live on a hidden link that all the guys on the notification list for that particular engine got, and everybody had an equal opportunity to pull the trigger on that engine. So with that being said, I'm going to introduce you now to Sean, because he's the one that pulled the trigger on that engine. He's the one went into this knowing that he was part of a beta test for the selling procedure and the support and the installation procedure, because this engine was installed by a certified installer. Okay. So he knew he was going into this, and we thought there was going to be some bumps, right? It's the first time we had done it like this. Although this was coming off the heels of our premier program we've been doing since 2015, where we let our certified installers install the engines. Even though it's coming off the heels of that program, it was still the first engine from a new program. So I'm thinking, hey, teething problems, we're going to have issues, but it was quite the opposite. And if the weather would have worked out right, he would have had his car back in like 9 days. And that's never, ever, ever happened again. I think he got it back in less than 2 weeks or something
11,
like that.
11 days.
Yeah, 11 days. So and that was with bad weather, and that held up the testing some at the certified installers location. So anyway, Sean, Bobby, I'm going to let you guys kind of have a little bit of an interview back and forth here, because of course, Bobby has got his own questions that he's come up with, because he knows what enthusiasts want to hear. And he knows what guys that are interested in these cars want to hear, because he's one of those people. And I'm just going to let you guys have a bit of an interview back and forth. And then, Sean, I guess after you answer something, I might be able to add a little bit to it. But it's going to be interesting to see what you thought about this process, with it being the first time it was done and the first time we sold an engine this way. And I think people are like, why is it got to be so convoluted? Why has it got to have all these steps? I think it's important that you have a procedure in everything you do. You can't have just things be haphazard and you end up with a result like this, right? We've got it greatly simplified, and you don't have to wait a year and a half or 2 years for an engine anymore. If you're quick on the trigger and you got cash in your wallet, you can buy this engine and have it installed in 11 days.
Hey, Sean. Thank you, man.
Yep.
Appreciate you joining us, man.
Oh, it's good to be here.
It'd
be better if I were in the car, but Mother Nature and distance are not treating me well right now.
It's all good. It's all good. Well, I just wanted to tell everybody that Sean and I were talking before we started going live, and one thing I love about cars is that every car has a story, and every car has some kind of a memory behind it. And honestly, I'm probably just as fascinated by a lot of the stories that I hear from people that have owned these cars. I love to go to the car shows and the Cars and Coffee events and just talk to people and say, how'd you get this car? What's the backstory? And I always love to hear, what they went through to get these cars. It seems like most of the people that have owned, contrary to popular belief, these, especially the M9X generation, really don't come from, like, everybody looks at these cars, oh, you got to be mega rich. That's not really true. In fact, a lot of these cars are cheaper than even some of the cheapest 4-cylinder cars out there. But you wouldn't think that, people that walk up to the Porsche and they go, oh my gosh, this is the coolest thing at all. But I've always been fascinated, Sean, about, the stories behind these cars and what you had to do to get this car and everything that's involved. So why don't you just start off and tell us, what is your Porsche story?
So mine's probably one of the less interesting Porsche stories, but I think it was about summer before last. Sold my boat because between my daughter's schedule and my wife getting motion sick, we weren't using it. And so it was I spent more time cleaning it than using it. So it was time to sell it, which temporarily left me with a big garage space and too much money. And as I jokingly used to say, a retired car guy who had focused on my bike and the boat and not done much with cars in a while, that's a bad thing. Those are two bad things to have. So I started thinking about getting back into cars and started looking at, I had a string of 2 or 3 BMWs before I got out of cars. Always had a couple of little like hot hatchback cars. Used to like to drive, used to like to do track events and autocross. And so I started thinking about, what do I want to look at? And so started thinking about Porsches. And as I told you before we started, my very first car was a 72 Volkswagen van with the flat 4. And so it was kind of neat for me to come sort of full circle, but with a lot more power and a lot better handling and less rattles than the 72 Volkswagen van. So I actually started looking at 996s and 997s. I like the 997 body style more because it's kind of holds true to the the real real Porsche.
The iconic look. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll just on a side note, I mean, yeah, there was a lot of controversy about the 996 because of what they did. Well, Pinky Lay, I think that's how he was pronounced his name. He designed a 996, but honestly, in all fairness to the 996, Porsche, Barry Porsche, the son, before he passed away, was saying that 996 actually saved the company because they were in bad shape. But I totally get it. I mean, that's why a lot of people like the 997 because it has more of the iconic look to it. But basically, it's the same car. I mean, a lot of the underpinnings and everything. Jake can tell you all the specifics there. But of course, they did up the interiors a little bit different. But for the most part, it still has an M9X engine. M97. Some of them had the M96, I believe, right, Jake? And some of the early ones. Continue on, Sean. I don't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, no worries. If I had the space and hadn't just bought a very nice engine, I would probably have one of each. So
absolutely,
someday maybe.
Hey,
I was actually
one thing that's interesting. So something that's interesting. So you said your first vehicle was a '72 Volkswagen bus. So you see behind me here in the engine room, this crankshaft, that's what that's out of. I'm actually building one of those engines right here. So that engine is what started my company. That's what I started with, was building those. And I still build a lot of them. See that block right there? That's a brand new crankcase for one of those engines.
Well, that base block was shared with the 914, wasn't it?
Yeah, same engine. It's just the bus. The bus spec was, it was made for more torque and it, and that sort of thing. But yeah, it's the same foundation from 1.7 to 2 liters. And the thing is, used to when you talk 914 around Porsche people, they just shunned you like, what? That's a Volkswagen. But now the thing is, all those guys that shunned you, they want a 914 now. And the cars are cool. So I'm like, how the hell this happened? When I was in the 914s, everybody that was a Porsche lover, if it wasn't a tail dragon 911, that you didn't rate anything. They didn't want you to come to events. And now, oh my goodness, that's a 914 and it's not rusted out. I want one. So it's crazy. But anyway, I thought that was kind of funny that what you started with is what I started with, both as an enthusiast and in business.
Well, and I got to say, as a 16-year-old kid, with a well-worn VW bus with a wood front bumper, it was nice to tell my friends it had the same engine as a Porsche 914. So that was my story every time somebody asked me about my bus. But so
tell us, Sean, okay, so you sold the boat. So how long of a process to get you into this car? And I kind of got to get an idea of why you wanted the 997. But tell us kind of the amount of time it took before you actually found the one.
So this is where bringing trailer is a bad thing. I actually ended up buying the car before I'd sold the boat. I had a deal done on the boat. I was just waiting for the guy's financing to come through. And fortunately I was sitting on enough cash that I could make it happen. But I had been watching Bring a Trailer, and which is a bad thing to do. Looked at a lot of cars, and I wanted a cab because I wanted my daughter likes to ride with me. She likes being out in the air. So wanted to get a cab that we could use. And so I started watching, bid on a couple. And then actually I wasn't the winning bidder on this car. I think I was second, like the second person out. It hit a little high and I stopped. And then a couple of days later, I got the always fateful email from Bring a Trailer that the original bidder had backed out, and if I wanted, they'd put me in touch with the seller. And so I said, why not? And the seller is actually a guy who runs a small car dealership in of all places, Deal, New Jersey, which that'll tell you interesting story on its own. And so went back and forth with him a little bit, made a deal on it. And then couple wired him the money, and about a week later, and this was still, I think this was still during the this was summer, August of 21, so still in the COVID time. Hopped on a plane, flew to New Jersey because I have lots of airline miles one way, took an Uber out to his place and drove the car back 500 miles, which considering the date code on the
quick question.
Yeah.
Did it concern you? I know you're from the north. This is no disrespect, but you're in the Rust Belt, man. The sand and the salt they put on the roads just does numbers on these cars.
Yeah, but
it concern you? Did it?
Yeah.
Now, honestly, I bought a car
Yeah.
from Pennsylvania,
Yeah.
and it has been great. But it's a Volvo, and it's a different. I mean, they build these cars like the Volvos are. One of their expressions is these cars are born in snow. But a Porsche, that would concern me. You know, I would
So
be like, what
the
if they
history,
drove it all year round, or is it just a
yeah.
seasonal car?
So the history on the car, because again, that's, as I was researching the car, so it spent some time in Connecticut, and then it went to California, and then it went to Florida. It was actually owned, because I'm the third or fourth owner of it. It was owned by a lawyer in Florida, and honestly, I was more concerned about the time in Florida, because what salt air will do to anything mechanical is worse than worse than the
Absolutely,
snow. But
absolutely. And they think that everybody says, I want a car from the South. How south are you talking about? Because you get down in South Florida, and they'll just the same. I can't tell you.
Yeah.
My family is from Miami, so when you've been down there and you see what it does to these vehicles down there, it's just like what it does up north.
Well, that's my boat was a saltwater boat, and it came from Fort Walton Beach. And I spent the winter after I got it, I spent hours with a Scotch-Brite pad cleaning every piece of stainless steel and dealing with everything from that salt.
It'll do it. It'll do it. Yeah, if you get near that salt water, it will.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just didn't understand these people like in Daytona that drive their cars in the water down there on the beach. I wouldn't get anywhere near it.
Yeah, but this one had good pictures, and it only had, when I got it, it had just under 35,000 miles. So, it was very clearly a second, third, fourth fun car, because at that point, 15 years old and 34,700
miles. Did it
miles.
concern you that it wasn't? Here's a little irony to throw in here. Some of and Jake can elaborate on this. When people look for cars, they're looking for low miles cars, and low miles cars will be a lot more money than the higher miles cars. But what Jake and Charles and some of the others that have been looking at these cars and working with these engines for more than 20 years have noticed that the low mileage cars suffer worse than the high mileage cars.
So I learned all this.
Did that not cross your mind, man?
Well, so here's one of the things, and I haven't done this in a while, but one of my bad habits with vehicle purchases is I'll end up jumping a little early, and then I end up learning everything after the fact. Once I own something, then I start digging in deep. I mean, I joined RENNCAST, I started poking around, and that's when I started to learn about. I mean, I knew about the IMS bearing thing, because I do have a friend with a 996 cab who had an IMS bearing failure and had to have the engine rebuilt. So I knew about that. So that was one of the things, the fact that it had the bigger IMS bearing, but I did not know anything at that point in time about bore scoring or any of the other failure modes, but then started learning, and that got me on to, finding out as I started. And after I got the car, I realized at some point, because all of my toys are nowhere near stock, at some point I knew I was going to do some kind of engine build, because, the sad part is, the 997, the non-turbo 997 has such a wonderful chassis, but I feel like there's just not quite enough motor to match that wonderful chassis. And so I knew at some point I was going to do something, and that's what led me to start to look at Flat Six and all of Jake's videos. And so I started to learn, and I'm like, I realize I have a bit of a ticking time bomb. So I need to think about, what should I do with this?
Well, before we go that far, let me back up a step.
Yeah.
That I forgot to ask you. What is it about the 997? I think you said it was a 2006 C4S Cabriolet.
Yep.
What is it about? You said the iconic look, but what was it about of this car versus, say, something newer like a 991 or a 992?
So some of it obviously was cost. I mean,
so you had a budget.
A bit of it. I was trying to stay, and of course, as always, I went a little over, but trying to stay within, what I promised my wife I would stay within what I got out of the boat, and somewhere around there. But also, I like two things. I like are, one, the fact that the 997 is smaller. I mean, the 991, 992, they are bigger. I've sat in a couple, I've driven a couple.
It is crazy how big they look, because of course, I've been to Jake's lot
Yeah.
and I've seen the size of the 997. I've gone to these car events and you'll see a 991 and a 992 right next to a 997. And I just couldn't believe how big they've gotten. They
Yeah.
really
And
are.
I also like to do as much of my own work as possible. I mean, on my motorcycle, I've done everything on it except split the cases. I wanted a car that I could work on that, and I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid of the electronics end of it. The tuning, once I learn, once I learn it, I want to start to delve into that in a couple of years. But I've got a Durametric, so I've started to dig into all the data logging and everything. But the newer ones, it starts to get to the point where you've got to have permission from the mothership even to look at it cross-eyed. And that's the nice thing about 997. It's got enough electronics to be a little modern. It's got the stability control and things when you want it, but it's still mechanical enough. It's got it's got hydraulic power steering. It's drive-by-wire. It's not a throttle cable, but most of I think 99 was the last 99X that had a throttle cable, but it's still analog enough that it feels like a glove rather than an appliance. And that's
and I tell you, all the time people ask, or they try to compare doing something like what you've done with your 9971 with doing that to even a 9972, or just trading for a 9972 or a 991. And I've got a lot of guys that have had both cars, and some of them have gone back to the car you have. Like they got out of a 997, they went into something newer, and then they realized it really wasn't what they thought it was going to be because the 997 spoiled them. And I mean, I've driven all of these cars, a lot of them. I mean, a lot of these cars. And, every car we build an engine for, it gets 104 test miles before it leaves. And before I hired Richard, my test driver, I did it all. And it kind of sucks when you drive cars, like 5 different cars, 100 miles a day, in the same day. I've driven this 5 different cars, 100 miles each in the same day, from daylight till dark, doing that all day long. It gets old. Even though we got an epic test road, we call it the flat 6 ring. But what I'm getting at is, having driven all of these and compared them, I don't want anything newer than a 9971. I just don't, anything newer is too big. It's desensitized. It's too heavy. Most of them are PDKs. They're that one generation, which I really don't care for. I don't know. It's just really strange how many people have gone back to a 9971 after owning something else. And it's also interesting now how many messages I get from guys that say, right out of the gate, when they send that first message through the ticketing system, I've decided the 9971 C2S that I have is my forever car. I got one of these today, by the way. It's my forever car. I've decided that I do not want anything newer than this. So I know putting your engine in the car is the best way to get a return on my investment. I got a guy that said that today, and I agree with that. And obviously, I don't think this guy had even seen videos, or I don't think he was even on RENNList. I mean, he's only owned the car, this particular car, for a few weeks, but he's had a 996 before. And so obviously the 996 and the 997, there is a lot of upgrades to going to a 997 from a 996, but I also love 996s. So I think that Bobby asked a good question, and that was a really good answer too, Sean, because it's something people always have this understanding of. I want the newest thing I can afford. And in some days past, people always were told, buy the newest Porsche you can afford. But now those cars are not what a Porsche is about, I do not believe. And keep in mind, I come from the the old school side of Porsches, where it was an upgrade to have power brakes. Your heat smells like oil when you turn it on. Your defrost sucks. Your AC sucks, but you have an epic driving experience, and that's where I came from. Yeah, that's where I came from. The first time I got in a 996, it was 100 degrees outside. I turned on the AC and it was frigid, and I'm like, you got to be kidding me! How did they do this? I came from my 88 Carrera and got into that, and I'd upgraded my AC on the 88 Carrera, but it was nowhere near cold on a 100-degree day. But that's a good point, because when people are trying to make decisions about investing in a car, the first thing that I tell them, number one, and I think I even asked you this over a year ago or whenever you contacted us first, was, do you love the car? Number one, do you love the car? If the answer to that is no, I am not and never will be your guy. I don't want to be your guy. I want to build these engines for the guys who have a forever car.
Well, I will say, when I found out you'd stopped the old program and didn't know when the new one was going to start, I started to contemplate whether I wanted it to be the forever car or not, because, I wanted something that had everything else, because it still needs, I've got to replace the headliner. There's a bunch of stuff I need to do, but, now it's got an engine that I know is going to last.
Well, how did you identify, Sean, back up to the engine. You got this car in.
Yeah.
The beautiful, beautiful car. What was it that happened? How long did you have the car before you realized this engine needs help? I know we talked about the horsepower, but you were learning about the issues on windlass, and were you getting any check engine lights or anything like that?
No. So the one thing I took it to, there's a good independent shop in not too far from me, who does a lot of work on does a lot of work on Porsches and other European cars. Took it there, had it gone over stem to stern, all the fluids changed, wanted good first professional opinion on everything. One of the things, and I think by then I'd actually I learned about flat six innovations. I was really approaching it from the horsepower end of things, because I knew even after driving the car for a couple of months, I'm like, I'm going to need to do an engine build, because I know what I want it to be, and it's not quite there yet. But the one thing they mentioned is that they heard some slight tapping, which at that time that was when I hadn't learned what bore scoring was yet. But I also, and this is where all the pieces start to come together. So the gentleman that I bought the car from, who has a small dealership in New Jersey, if you search him on YouTube, and I'm not gonna mention any names, but if you find my car on Bring a Trailer, you can find the whole history. But there's a guy, I can't remember if it's like Porsche Dad or something, who bought a car from this dealer. Turned out it had bore scoring. He was stuck with it. He actually ended up rebuilding his own engine and made a series of YouTube videos. A lot of trial and error. I don't know if the car is actually still running or not at this point, but I realized that I probably ended up with something that's got some potential problems coming either sooner or later. And so that was the point where I decided I want to do an engine build anyway. So I'm either going to do an engine build, or I'm going to start thinking about, do I need to move on from it? And so really, when the new program, when Jake announced the new program, and when he started telling us that new timing for the first engine, that's really what made my decision that I was going to hang on to the car, and it was going to become the forever car.
Sean, actually, Jake, did you examine this engine? I know the program's different, but when his engine was taken out of the car, was it dissected? And
so the way it works is these engines are installed and basically processed by the certified installer, meaning that the certified installer, like in his case, was able to pick the engine up from us because he was already heading south. He picked the engine up from us, and then he took the engine by Sean's house and picked Sean's car up in his trailer, took it all back to his shop, pulled the old engine out of the car, got the new engine back in the car in less than a week. And honestly, we don't have the core back yet, because this all just happened. So, it's been only a few days since Sean took delivery of the car. So we don't have the core back yet. But, to qualify for a tier 1 purchase position in your application, it's got to be an elective build, and you have to have less than 120,000 miles. You can't have any failures. And his engine didn't have any failures that were noticeable. Now, if it has bore scoring, we don't care. We don't classify, for this program's means anyway, bore scoring as a failure. because we're going to remove those cylinders completely in their entirety. So we don't care if they're scored. They're going to end up, as chips of material that get recycled and they come back as a Kia or a Hyundai or something one day.
You. It's not.
But we don't care.
You've called it a mode of failure in the past, but it's really not a total loss.
Well, it is a mode of failure.
The engine can be saved.
Yeah, it's the only mode of failure that we consider doesn't have collateral damage. Now, if somebody drives it so long that everything, the oil is all sludged up and all that, it can create collateral damage. But usually it gets so loud, the knocking sounds are so loud, it's eating so much oil that you can't drive the car when it gets to that point. So
I saw one, I don't know where it was, maybe it was on the engine group, where it had eaten into the piston skirt so bad, it's almost like the piston skirt was almost completely gone. I couldn't believe it.
Oh, yeah. They can wear so thin. It can wear so thin that it breaks off, and I've seen that. But generally speaking, that's not going to happen. And even if a piston breaks, we still don't care because we're throwing it away. We throw away 80 pounds of stuff out of these engines. This is a no compromise engine program. We're not just rebuilding stuff and slapping it together in a few hours and replacing only what is worn in that engine. We replace the things that aren't worn, because the way I look at it, they aren't worn now, but they still have X miles on them and they were still built by the lowest bidder. So the way I look at it is, why put some new parts in it when other parts have 50 or 80 or 100,000 miles on them? Now, of course, you get to the point where you're always going to have a crankcase that still is being reconditioned and brought up to spec with Nicky's. It still has X miles on it. Your cylinder head castings still have X miles on them. So because of that, it still needs to be classified as a remanufactured or a rebuilt or a reconstructed engine, because you can't replace all those things. But the main wear items that will leave you on the side of the road with a broken engine are the things that we try to replace, whether they're worn or not.
Well, I was just going to say, I hate to use the word inevitable, but it's almost like if you buy an M9X generation of the Carrera M96 or M97, you might as well be keeping it on the radar. I would think that would be, not to say that's going to piss off a lot of people because they think that you can completely avoid it if you take care of it. And I think you can mitigate it, right? But with good practices.
So this is the thing, and there's a video series coming from Porsche Club of America. It was something that I set out on because I wasn't feeling well, and some other guys in the group needed to really take this bull by the horns and explain some things. But basically, every engine out there, I don't care what kind of engine it is, gasoline, diesel, 2-stroke, 4-stroke, every engine on the face of the planet starts to die the day that it's first operated. It is killing and consuming itself the entire time that it's running. Just like humans, we start to die the day we're born. So every engine's going to fail. That is inevitable. It's going to happen. Now, the idea is to mitigate the chances of a failure, and you want the engine to actually wear out. With my experience with these engines, I've only seen about 5 of them wear out ever, because usually something breaks, sometimes because it was made by the lowest bidder, sometimes it's because it just wasn't proven, sometimes it was because of the way things were assembled at the factory, or when they were assembled, but it will usually break in some manner before it wears out. So, today, most of the guys that come to us, the vast majority are like Sean. They want an elective build because they know it's coming. And the main thing is they want to take advantage of it. They want to take advantage of a failure. Failure is opportunity, if you look at it that way. If this is your forever car, if you love this car, if you want to keep this car, then if it fails, you have the chance to make it into something it never was before. And we've created that, right? So you can get more power from it. We can take away those 31 modes of failure. We can take away the chances of it scoring bores. We can get away from drop valve seat problems. We can get rid of all the broken timing chain issues. All the things these engines have had a problem with, we have created a fix for, and we've enhanced them. So And I know that I don't bother going on RENList anymore. I actually had myself banned from there. But, basically, there was a thread that started a couple weeks ago or something about the dependability of our engines. And a lot of my purchasers were sharing what they had posted over there inside our private Flat Six Innovations group on Facebook. And if somebody was looking for negative information, they certainly did not get it. So, who knows why threads like that pop up. But at the end of the day, failure is opportunity if you look at it in that manner. And like with Sean, his engine didn't fail. Now, we don't know if it had bore scoring starting or not. Knowing what I know about those engines, especially the ones from the north, it probably has it. And Sean, when we take it apart, we'll throw it out there and I'll let you see what it looks like. But we're going to take it and 3 others apart. We're just waiting for a little lull and a time to do that. So we still got to grab the core and then get it back here and then take it apart.
Well, and if you hadn't gotten 2737 done so fast, I'd know, because about now I was going to pull the sump plate and scope it and see what it looked like. But you got done too fast, and so I lost my window.
I think this new program is really cool because in the past there was a lot of time that people had to wait, deliver the car, and be without the car for a long period of time. This is I think it's an incredible move.
Oh,
I mean,
we went astounded.
I was going to say, we went from a guy that would normally be on in an average scenario, waiting for an engine for 20 months and doing without his car for 5 of those 20 months to a guy who got a car back on the road in 11 days. That's incredible. And we did it with no hiccups. It was flawless. There was no problems with anything. That just doesn't happen usually, but we put I put a year into getting to the sale of FSI 2737 because honestly, this is the only one of these sales I'm going to be associated with. That's one reason I changed this stuff, is because I want out. I want out of the business of selling and building engines. I want to develop said engines, and I want to oversee the employees that's been with me for 20 years doing that. So this one, Sean, this one was the one where the program that I put together with Charles at LN and Judd, who's going over to the LN side, this is basically, I'm done. We know that everything is in place. We know it all worked perfectly. Even the first time around, those guys can refine it. But going back to the bore scoring thing, Bobby, people always want to hear me say that every one of these engines is going to die of bore scoring. All I can tell you is every one of these engines is going to die of something. It's inevitable. They're all going to fail if they don't wear out, right? Or they're all going to wear out if they don't fail. It's according to which way you look at it. So it's going to die. And that's why people are looking for an elective fix for said failure before it leaves them on the side of the road. And especially with a new program, they don't have to do without the car for very long at all. So, Sean, what's interesting is that you are actually one of the very few people, if not the only person, that's ever bought one of these engines from us that can truly compare before and after with a car, because most of these guys forgot what before was, because after took so long to get. You see what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see when we advance through the interview here what you think, because people usually can't judge it like that.
Well, we had a period of nice weather. I actually, before Andy picked up the car, I took it out and drove it a good bit, both because I wanted to drive it one last time stock, but also just to make sure I remembered what it felt like as a stock car, so I could do a decent comparison when it came back. So that was part of my thinking. And fortunately, the weather, amazingly, in Central Ohio was cooperating with me, so I did get it out for a good run, so that I could feel the difference when it came back.
Well, Sean, tell us, why Flat Six Innovations? I mean, there's a lot of shops out there that could rebuild your car's engine. There's the short block program through Porsche that seems to be resurrected now that we're outside the pandemic. But what was it about Flat Six Innovations that made you consider using their engine program?
So simply because Jake's the best in the country. I mean, the Porsche short block program never crossed my mind, because if I was going to invest in an engine, I wasn't going to invest in the stock engine. And this is where my motorcycle experience starts to come in. I've got a heavily modified Harley V-Rod, which Porsche actually collaborated on that engine design.
Oh yeah, that's one of my favorite Harleys, believe it or not. It's just when they came out with that bike, I thought, oh my gosh.
But it was, I had back in 2009, I had I collaborated with what was then the best V-Rod engine builder in the country, which unfortunately they're no longer in existence, and they built that engine. I did the spec, but that I still have that bike. I'm doing silly things with nitrous oxide with it now. It has performed. It has lasted. I could hop on that bike today if it weren't 29 degrees and ride it for 500 miles. And that was because, I had a really good build with a really good spec done by, at that point, the place that did it, they had built a lot of engines. They'd blown up a lot of engines. So kind of, not quite to the level that Jake and Flat Six Innovations do, but they had done the same thing. They had identified a lot of the failure modes of that engine, and they'd engineered solutions, and those solutions are still holding that engine together today. So if I was going to find somebody to work with to build an engine, I wanted somebody who had, worked through all of that and, built the best engine, that was possible for these cars. I didn't want something that, 5 years from now, I was going to be right back where I started.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm just kind of repeating what Jake says. I mean, he's spent 20 years working this engine and knowing all the things that need to be changed to make it a better engine. And I'm biased. People probably laughing. Yeah. I am biased because I do work for Flat Six Innovations and Ellen Engineering. Started RenVision together with Jake. But even if I wasn't with them, I would still have to sit back and think, do I want to put an engine back in this car that got me where I'm at right now with the problems that it has, which are the biggest problems are the IMS bearing failure and cylinder bore scoring. If anything, we've done in the last 5 years, Jake and I have brought awareness to this problem. Now, some people probably would hate us for that because honestly, I've read it. People want to turn a blind eye to this problem. I'll just drive it injured. And they'll get what they'll get. And they say, well, they ask me, what do you think will happen? Eventually, you'll start getting check engine lights, misfires. Because my friend, who I call my brother from another mother, his name is Matt Mitchell. I bought his engine. And he inherited this car from his dad. His dad passed away. And it was one owner C4S 2003, beautiful car. And I did a whole video on it for anybody that wants to watch the video. It's called A Porsche Story. And he got this car and he knew that he needed to do the IMS bearing because it had the most problematic single row, the 6204 single row bearing that had the most problems. So he dropped the engine. He has his own shop. He's a very competent guy with engines and stuff. So he dropped the engine, took the transmission out, put the new bearing, fresh bearing in the car, put it all back together, put the engine back in the car, was driving it, and he was doing some, I think, Auto X, and he started getting bad misfires. He said, how is it possible? It's got brand new coil packs. It's got brand new plug. Everything's been checked. And he's like you, he was not aware of this problem with cylinder bore scoring. So he started doing a little investigation, Sean, and found out that this engine, the M9603 engines were very susceptible to the problem. So he scoped it. Sure enough, he had really bad scoring. I have images of that engine, which now is going to be sent to LN. I ended up selling it to a guy it's actually a Flat Six customer. He's going to resurrect that engine and put it back into another car. So that's going to be exciting to see. But anyway, getting back to your thing, I think everybody wants to know the butt dyno that you've been telling me about. You did a butt dyno check before. Tell me how it was after.
Well,
and we understand the whole idea behind butt dynos.
Well, no, like we were talking about earlier, though. We'll talk about on hard throttle in a minute. The first thing that was the most amazing to me, and I still this is the kind of the bonus. I've had lots of vehicles with motors in various states of tune. Usually, there's a compromise. If you've got something that makes strong power, strong power up top, usually it's not as streetable. It's not great in parking lots. And honestly, a stock M9701 is not the greatest engine in a vehicle in a parking lot. It's a little jerky, it doesn't, it's cranky, I guess the best way, at low speed. The 2737, I mean, you can just about let the clutch out without the accelerator and it'll just kind of put itself along at parking lot speed. I mean, the most amazing thing, and because I expected the power, the flat torque, all the things that sitting through Jake's webinar, talking to the whole gang at Flat Six, I expected all that. What I didn't expect was how well mannered it is at parking lot speeds. I mean, the car, that's the amazing thing. So that was the first impression because Andy dropped off the car and I had a appointment with a knee surgeon. So we got it, he dropped it. I talked to him. The car was still running. So and the weather was passable. So I hopped in the car and drove it to the knee surgeon, but it was a grand total of 10 miles and it was all, local roads. So I didn't get a chance to do anything fun with it, but I was amazed at how much more streetable the car is. Now, obviously last Sunday we had a little bit of a break in the weather. And so I was able to take it out and put it through its paces. And, it is incredible at speed. The torque builds and, it's got, such a flat torque curve. The power's there everywhere. You do have to watch it because it gets to the red line pretty quickly. So you have to keep it. And, I haven't gotten it loose yet because the roads were a little slick. So I was being a little careful, and it's a 4S. So it takes a little more effort to actually start to drift it a little bit, but it's amazing. But it's funny that, I've got somewhere around 400 horsepower motor now. And the thing I'm still most amazed with is how good it is at 5 miles an hour. So
Yeah. And the thing I'll say about that is because the combo, right? Because when we do the heads on those engines, we don't want to lose port velocity. It's really easy to get more flow, get more CFM, and get more CFM at higher lift, right? But we want to keep the airspeed. We want to keep that high velocity down low. So there's a compromise of velocity versus flow. And then the intake modifications and things that could still be added to it. You've got another 40 or 50 horsepower that you could add to this thing later on down the road if you do the RX 3900 intake, the full induction system. If you do the carbon air box, then you change the cams and do that would be a RX 3905 cam package. So there's other things you can do to it later on down the road. So if you start getting used to it, you can add those. But you will see when you add those, at least the cams, that you're going to lose some of that down low. Not a lot, because I really tried to keep that area under the curve as a primary focus. But most everybody thinks about an engine making this kind of power, and they always have a question is, will my red line be higher? And I have to tell them, you don't want it to be higher, and it doesn't need to be higher. And if anything, we're moving the peak horsepower down 400 to 500 RPM. You don't notice that because it still zings all the way to the red line. But if you got it on a dyno, you see that it's making peak power about 6,600. Where most of these cars would make peak power right at about $7,000 like yours. So, making it a little earlier like that and having bigger breathing capacity. Basically, we went up to 101 millimeter bore size with yours, and that makes a big difference in how the heads operate. And you've done engine work, you understand about making things bigger. An engine's just an air pump. So if you make it bigger, then it's going to get a bigger gulp of air at a lower RPM. So you make peak power sooner. And that's one of the things that makes these engines with the combinations that I've done work so well, is because we got the right cam, the right heads, the right compression ratio to match the intake and the exhaust for a car that has a broad linear power curve. And then I don't know if you notice how smooth it is, but
Oh,
that's
yeah.
the effect of the dynamic balancing. People put engines together all the time and they don't balance them. Having had a balancer on my floor from CWT Industries, which is the leader in balancing equipment. Randy Neal did my machine over 20 years ago. I've updated it 3 times with everything he's ever done. I'll tell you, I wouldn't put together a Briggs and Stratton engine that wasn't balanced. And trust me, my daughter races junior dragsters, and we balance engines for those things as well. It's a little single cylinder, Briggs and Stratton. So it makes a difference. Balancing makes a difference, and people don't believe.
I tell people that to try to get an idea. It's like balancing your tires, your wheels when you get new tires. If you didn't balance those wheels, which everybody probably experienced wheels that weren't balanced correctly, you know what it does for the car. It shakes you like it's on some kind of crack hit or something,
That's another noticeable difference. I mean, just from idle onward, and that was one of the things another one of many things that made me really want this motor was that it was stationary balanced, because again, the difference between what left the Porsche factory, and I said this to Jake a couple of days ago. I remember in one of the webinars I was in, one of the previous owners said, this is the engine that Porsche should have put in the car. And now I understand why he said that, because it is. I mean, it's the car's more refined. It makes more power. I mean, it is everything that you expect.
I've been hearing that same statement. This is the engine that Porsche should have put in the car.
Yeah.
I started hearing that building 914 engines 25 years ago is when I heard that about 914s with the things that I was doing with those. So it's funny to go full circle with this from those old cars to these, and hearing people that aren't even in the same realm, not even in the same millennium, talking about the same thing. And it's because of the combination that we put together. Now, something I'll tell you about the balancing thing. We didn't just balance that reciprocating mass. We balanced the reciprocating and the total rotating masses, the whole entire dynamic mass. But all of these engines of the FSI program, we're replacing the flywheels and we're replacing the clutches. We've always replaced clutches, but over time, especially in the early days, the flywheels were newer. They didn't need to be replaced. Now almost every flywheel out there needs to be replaced, and you can't resurface them. And it's not protocol to resurface a dual mass flywheel, and they never work right when you do it. They chatter and have all kinds of bad behavior. So, when people look at this engine, they need to understand it's not just an engine. It's got all the sensors replaced that are on the engine. It's got a brand new flywheel and clutch. I mean, that's, in some of these cases, that's almost $2,000 worth of flywheel and clutch. But what that means is that we can dynamically balance those parts to this engine, and they're going to be good for 100,000 miles. And if somebody ever needs a clutch or a flywheel replaced, we've got all the balance records right there in our CWT balancer. We can pull them up, and you can buy a balanced clutch package or a balanced flywheel and clutch package that is still balanced to your engine 10 or 15 or 20 years from now. So, and I've done that. Guys that I balanced something for 20 years ago, they need a clutch, boom. I pull up the specs, I throw my mandrel in the thing, I match everything up, and there you go. You've got match balance. It's not exactly 100% perfect like it would be if all those parts were still in the machine, but nobody's ever noticed the difference. So I think that balance is performance. Because even the NOx sensors are part of this equation. The NOx sensors can pick up harmonics that come from imbalance. We've seen that. I can see it pulling ignition timing. It confuses harmonics with detonation in some cases. That's how particular the NOx sensors are. So if you've got a little bit of knock going on and you got harmonics, it's going to pull the ignition timing way back. So, and I know that you got some experience with tuning stuff, and you understand what I'm talking about with that.
I've seen that in data on my bike, where the NOx sensing kicks in, and I watch it pull the timing back. So,
and especially on a Harley where everything is like solid mounted and the engines inherently don't run smooth. You know what I mean? So
that's where the V-Rod's a little different. It's because, again, Porsche had a hand in the design, so it's smoother, but it's still, when you push when you push the limits, you start to see some of that, and you got to pull back. That's part of the process.
Oh yeah.
So, Sean, I take it the V-Rod is your lifetime bike. And this is
Yeah,
a
I've had
loaded
it.
question. Do you see
Yeah.
this car being the same, or would you ever get something different?
So this is an interesting question because I was actually thinking about this tonight. One of the things that I think is kind of cool about the new FSI engine program. So, the old program, you kept the engine that came with your car. That there's, as a car guy, there's something about that. Kind of the one cool thing about the fact that it's now an engine swap is if something happens to the car itself, or maybe I decide in 5 years I don't want a cabriolet anymore because I'm getting too old and I don't want my head in the wind all the time, or I want to drive it more in the winter. I could buy another car that takes an M9701 and talk to my certified installer and swap it again. So I almost feel like, again, I plan on keeping this car, but you never know. The thing I know is I plan on keeping this engine, and it'll probably stay in the car. But I almost feel like the new program gives you some interesting options if you do want to do something different down the road, because you still got that engine.
And I've had people do that. I've had guys that would go buy a used engine that just ran, put it in the car, pull our engine out of it, keep it. They might go buy another car that's a different color or a different package or whatever, and they put our engine in it. Or they would buy the new car, take the engine out of the new car, put our engine in the new car, and then put the old engine in the other car. We've seen musical engines before. We've had people bring cars back to us to have that done. When there was nothing wrong with the other car, it's just they didn't want it. So, like with you, that engine will flawlessly fit into any 05 to 08 C2S, C4S, 3.8 car. So Targa, anything, it'll bolt in all those, and it could even go into a base model with a couple of changes. So
yeah, and I don't plan on anything, but it's kind of neat to have that option and not have to think about, I'm gonna divorce the car from the engine, because I've already made that decision. So it's
well,
easy
and I'll
from
just
here.
jump in here and say something here, Sean, because this topic has come up. The purists don't like to disrupt anything the factory has done. And I totally get people that want to keep a car factory. But if you look at, let's say, a Carfax, it's not uncommon that Porsche dealerships swap the engines out. And I've gone down to Atlanta and talked to these people, and they'll just, when they have a severe engine problem, they swap engines out and get another core and put it in there. And so there's no such thing as a 100% pure car, and even the little
let me expand on that a little bit. So
okay,
with air-cooled cars, I think that I tend to keep air-cooled engines more along the lines of the way they were from the factory, because with the air-cooled stuff, it's pretty hard to beat the factory in many cases, because the engineers were still in charge. The accountants hadn't taken over. You started seeing the accountants take over more with the 993. People love the 993, but it's one of my less favorite air-cooled cars. I typically like the G-body cars. The Carreras up to 88, 89 is kind of where I think the sweet spot was. 964 started getting a little bit too much out there. Like they were trying to put 50 pounds of stuff in a 5-pound sack. They didn't re-engineer the car the way they did with the 993. But, with these water-cooled cars, very, very few people are concerned with engine serial numbers, because so many cars don't even have the right serial number logged down from the factory. The factory didn't keep track of it. When you hook up a factory Porsche tool or even AutoLogic to these cars, it'll tell you in the basic information what the engine number is supposed to be that's in the ECU. And you go look at the engine number that's in the car, even on cars that still have the Cosmoline on the engine, it's never been out, and it doesn't match. It's like it was never right from the factory. They just did not keep good records, just the way that, the VIN number records can say that an engine has a dual row IMS bearing, but it has a single row. They didn't keep good records. That's completely different than what it was with the air-cooled cars. They knew everything about the air-cooled cars, right down to the, limited slips and everything being accurate. But people are not really interested with keeping the original engines in these cars. That's one reason why this program that we're doing now is basically a swap out program that allows us to fill an order in 10 or 12 days. And people don't care. The only guys that do are the guys that have an anniversary car, the 04 anniversary cars. If you've got any of the factory X51 cars, obviously, a GT2, a GT3, obviously those numbers matching matter. But, the anniversary cars with those, I've taken on a couple of those still, even as the new program is taken off, the limited edition stuff where somebody wants to keep their engine serial number. I actually have a third category for those, and I might pick one out every now and then, and I might take on an engine and build that engine that belongs in that car if it's the right person and the right car and the right application, so that guy can keep his original serial number. But I'm not going to do that if it's just a guy that has a C4S or just a C2S or just a Targa. I might consider it with a Targa that's a 4S Targa because it's a rare car. But if it's a rare situation where it's an early car, it's something special about it, then it's important to keep those numbers matching. But if it's a car like Sean's, people don't care. And it's because so few of these cars still have the original engine anyway. Especially the early ones. And then toward the tail end of the production, there was also issues that led to a lot of engines being replaced under warranty. So that's my thoughts on the matching numbers thing. I think it's important with air-cooled stuff, but with these, nobody cares.
Well, I bought the car to drive, not to put in a bubble and stare at it. So I don't need the numbers to match. And like you said, with GT2, a GT3, something that's very low numbers. I still think if I had a GT3, I'd be driving it every chance I got. But
well, Sean, the last question I have for you is, tell us about, with the new program, what did you experience with purchasing the engine? So what was tell us all the good about it? And even
so the funny part is, again, right before I found out that 2737 was going to be available when it was, I was, as I said, I was planning, I was going to pull the sump plate on mine. I was going to scope it. And so I'd ordered a couple things from LN, and, I ordered magnetic drain plugs, some washers, a couple other things. And honestly, buying that engine was no different than, aside from being a little more money, no different than buying, magnetic drain plug and a couple of washers. The link went live. Fortunately, I was ready, and because I'd already bought some stuff from LN, I knew how the site worked, and I laid my plans. I was actually in my office at the time, but I had the iPad I'm talking to you on right now sitting next to me, all up, had two or three tabs with the LN site on it with the link to the engine, and I was refreshing. The engine actually went, I think the engine went live 40 some seconds later than the actual top of the hour or whatever the time was supposed to go live, because I was there and watching it. But I clicked the button, put down my deposit, and got then I got the email from the one guy at LN and took care of the rest of the funds. And I was actually trading messages with Judd about certified installers, because the only certified installer in the state of Ohio is Craftworks, and the guy there is really nice. He and I had actually talked when Jake first announced this program, but he's also a one-man shop and has a pretty wicked backlog. He sports a lot of track guys, and he said, if I'm in the middle of somebody's build for a track car, I've committed to have them ready for track season. And again, having friends that have raced, I understand that. So, I was talking to Judd about options, and we talked about Atlanta Speedworks, but then also he mentioned that Andy up at Andy Speed and Suspension in Momence, Illinois, was pretty much co-resident with LN, and that would be a good option, also being closer to me. And so Andy gave me a call. I think it was the Saturday before the engine went live. I talked to him a little bit. I think he was driving a trailer back from somewhere, and we seemed to gel well together. So ended up asking him to do it, and he took it on. And because of him moving race car trailers around a lot, as Jake mentioned earlier, he happened to be down in Georgia to pick up a trailer to bring it back up for repair. So he was able to stop at Flat Six, get my engine, come swing through to my house. I got to actually see my engine wrapped in its wrapped in its shrink wrap and load my car up, and then it went up to his place, and 11 days later it came back. So it was a flawless experience. I also think it was probably the single most expensive thing I've ever bought in a web transaction. But
well, and that was I knew it was going to sell quick because, the M9701 designation, like yours, is the hottest commodity, and luckily we just got another handful of low mileage cores for those. So we could basically have an engine program and only support that one designation. There's that much demand for it, just for that, Carrera S 05 to 08. So, but I knew it was going to sell quick, and I was outside like doing something on a tractor or something. I didn't even realize it was 3:00 yet. And Charles sends me a text, and it's like 1 minute after 3, and he says it's gone. And I'm like, what's gone? And he goes, the engine. And I said, damn, it was that quick? And he goes, yeah. I'm like, okay, well, I started doing my old air-cooled engines this way, selling them this way, and the quickest one of those that sold was like 14 minutes, and I thought that was crazy. But to sell it in a minute was pretty nuts. And then I think there was 12 guys right behind you that are probably pretty pissed off that they didn't get it, but they got another chance because I've got another one in the works. It'll be done in about a month or so, something like that. And just yesterday, we started on FSI 2799 is the next one. And that's a M9605, which is for a 05 to 08 base Carrera. That was originally a 3.6. We're taking that to a 4-liter stage 2. So actually it's going to make the same power as yours, even though it was a 3.6 to begin with. So, and in some cases we take those 3.6s and make even more power than we do with something starting with a 3.8, just because the heads are a little bit more favorable for what we're doing. So that one's in the works. And if anybody out there is watching this got a 05 to 08 base Carrera, if you hadn't got an application in for that, go ahead and get you an application started. If you're wanting an engine, you could have a car back in 11 days.
Yeah, I just looked. I got my confirmation email back from LN. It was 2:01 and 9 seconds Central Time. So 3:01:09. And like I said, it didn't go live till 38 or 40 seconds after 3 Eastern. So I jumped fast.
Well, it paid off. So
yep.
Yeah, absolutely. So Bobby says something about a battery. Oh, you got a battery's going bad? Oh, okay. His mic battery died. So we got to talk. So, but yeah, I'm blown away by how smooth everything went when we built the engine, how smooth Andy got it all done. And then the weather held you off, and obviously your mom's not been in the best health and stuff. And so it was kind of crazy that you had all that stuff going on, but it just worked out. And, I think that just proves that all the preparation we put into the program is really working out. And, this period of time here where we're finishing up the old backlog from the old program, and we're doing starting this new program, it's like we're ending one thing and we're going right into the other one, and it's just being slick as glass, because of preparation and having a good team. So
I'm interested to see what this looks like when your other engine builders are starting to build for the new program, and you've got one or two dropping at the same time rather than one at a time. That will be interesting.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, we've cut down the production by about 40 to 50% across the board, because there's certain cars we're just not working with anymore. The early Boxsters, really any Boxster up to 07, there's just so many of those cars on the market. We don't really get inquiries for them, so we're not supporting those. Basically we're only building 5 engines. We're doing the early cars with the 3.4 cars because there's demand for those now. People really like those early cars. I'm one of those people, so we're building those to 3.8s, and I'm even doing those now to a 4.2 with the early stuff, with some stroker stuff that I've been playing with for a while, and different cams and new head profiles, and then of course the 21, the those things big time. So we're doing those into 3.8s. I typically don't really do one to a 4-liter, but I'm probably going to do some to 4-liter. And then, of course, the M9605 and the M9701 like yours. So that's pretty much what we're trying to support, because that's what everybody wants. Those are the cars people really have a love affair with. They're really into those cars. And, and they're holding value. Obviously, the 9971 is holding its own. 996 prices have dropped some. The 997 prices, I think, for all the reasons we talked about earlier, are going to stay up there, and they're even going to get more
analog.
so. They're exactly
last of the analog car.
Yeah, people don't appreciate that till it's gone. And I think that's going to happen with all this stuff. The more analog it is, if it can still be made modern and still have good creature comforts, it's going to be more in demand. But yeah, so I mean, that's the thing about building these engines, is we're going to be doing 3 a month. Basically, that's the way things are scheduled, and we don't have a set schedule. It's just like we build what we want when we want. And of all the builders, we each have our own thing we like to do, according to how long somebody's been here or what they really want to do. I try to put a builder and assign them to a build that they want to build. Like Brent has been with me for 25 years, started out with air-cooled stuff. There's certain engines with these water-cooled cars that he just doesn't like to work with, and I get it. He hates 9 Alpha 1s. I'm with him. I don't like to build them. So I try not to give him a 9 Alpha 1 just because, hey, it's not what he wants. He likes these cars. And every now and then he still does something air-cooled. But I think that matters, that the builder, especially in my world where we don't have multiple people doing this work, this is something that's unique, because, it takes about 80 hours to process one of these engines. And we don't have a clock or a calendar in the shop, but basically it's 2 work weeks for one individual to do this, because when I assign a builder to something, that builder takes it apart. He processes everything. He does the tear down. He takes the photos, and then he's the one that's assigned to it until it leaves as a completely rejuvenated engine. And it's one pair of hands, it's one mind doing it. And it's full accountability, it's full responsibility. So I want those people to do what they like to do, because it makes them better at what they do. So, doing it that way where you don't have multiple people working on things, and you're not just taking a bunch of pieces and putting a pile of crankshafts over here and a pile of rods over here. You're actually building that same core engine that came apart, and you're just making it newer and better. I mean, that to me is what really characterizes the flat 6 difference. And we're not changing that. That's all the same. Honestly, the engine you got is actually more advanced than if you would have been part of the old program. And it was obviously done quicker than if you would have been part of the old program. If you were part of the old program, you still wouldn't have your car back. You wouldn't have your car back until June at this point, when that's the end of the line. So I think that it's going to be unique when we have these things scheduled. So 3 of them are getting done a month. They won't ever be 3 of them done at the same time, because we got them kind of staggered. But yeah, when one goes live and gets sold, and then the next one goes live, it'll be for a different car. And the next one goes live, that'll be for a different car, and then it'll kind of all start over again. That's kind of the way we've got it staggered. But luckily, I've done my part of that. That's going to be up to Judd and Charles and everybody at LN. So, all I've got to do is make sure things get taken apart, things get put together, and they get a good stamp of approval when they're done.
It'll be fun to watch, though.
Yeah,
especially because
it was pretty ironic yesterday to hit February 1 when I just had basically just zipped the zipper on the old program 1 year exactly before that. And I wanted to have the first engine for the new program done at the 1st of 2023. It got done, it got sold, it got installed quicker than I thought. And, now I'm just trying to build like one of these new engines for the new program a month, just one a month until we get to that end of the line and things start getting hammered out. We've already got the other ones in the pipeline. I've got a schedule of what's going to get built and when they're going to get built. And they're all stage 2s. And if it's a stage 2 based on M9605 or M9701, it's going to be a 4-liter. I'm going to throw some 4.1s in there too at some point.
So we have one question from YouTube from a James Ward. He's got a 2005 997 Carrera S. So I'm assuming that's the M9701.
It is.
And he's, believe it or not, he bought this car in 2007 from the original owner. And he's saying he's never heard of cylinder bore scoring until now. And he's like,
Well,
how long has this thing lasted? And I've said, this was kind of considered the number one mode of failure. And it seemed like the whole IMS bearing failure thing kind of overshadowed bore scoring for so many years because it was such a hot topic. But the bore scoring thing is.
So I'll expand on that a little bit. And it's funny because we've got another Flat Six Innovations owner, James Ward. He's actually active in the Flat Six Innovations Owners Lounge. So I thought that's who you were going to be talking about.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if this is the same guy, but it's interesting. He's just asking, when did bore scoring become a thing? I purchased my 2005 997S as a second owner in 2007 and had never heard of it.
Well, and the thing is, a lot of people had IMS bearing failures and never knew what an IMS bearing was either. At the same time, when did it become a thing? From the very beginning. We were seeing cars that were failing under warranty when his car was new. So, it's been a thing since the beginning. Obviously, a lot of things added up that helped to create the issues. Ethanol fuel is one of them. People that also as the blocks got closer to the end of production, there was some things that happened with the crankcases that we've seen traits where, maybe the quality control had gone down some. They just weren't able to keep track of things as much. The 9-alpha-1 engine was coming in, and they knew that. But yeah, he can just Google bore scoring, or he can go to our RenVision Focus on Bore Scoring video series, and he'll learn everything he needed to know about it. But I will say today, and ever since 2019, since January of 2019, 80% of the failures that were reported to us that resulted in subsequent engine builds came from bore scoring, period. It is number one, the biggest failure for all of these engines. And that does not take away the 9-alpha-1 either. We're seeing the bore scoring with 9-alpha-1. I had a 2016 2016 Cayman reported today with bore scoring. And I sent you a voicemail from one last week, Bobby, a GT4 that had bore scoring. So it's not widespread yet, but those cars are not old enough yet. Some of them are getting there, but we're starting to see it pop up more. And same thing with Cayennes. Cayenne engines had bore scoring. Some of the first bore scoring we heard, like the ticking sound, the first time that Charles and I really put together that ticking sound that was bore scoring in the early stages was from a Cayenne engine. The first engine I ever saw that had classic bore scoring was a Cayenne. And then it's the same exact problem through all of these engines. And I think until you get up to the 992, when Porsche started using Subibor, which is the plasma spray, which is our next generation of these engines that we've already got developed. We're just not releasing it because there's no reason. It's way expensive. But we've been working for almost 5 years at this point now to get it perfect. And it is perfect at this point. We don't really have to do anything else to it except for wait to the point where Nicosil is outlawed. And we know that's going to happen because it's plating processes. But until you get to a car that's new enough to have Sumibor cylinders from the factory, these problems are going to continue. We know it's going to happen.
Oh, yeah. There was a guy that had, I don't know that he had authority to do it, but he was a service tech at a Porsche dealership, and I used to enjoy watching his YouTube channel. And I don't think they had a big deal with him recording his working on these cars because it was always very positive until he started finding bore scoring on the Cayennes. And I guarantee you they Porsche headquarters sent him a letter saying, take it down, because they don't want that getting out. That is, I mean, anybody that's in the business doesn't want negative publicity. But he was scoping a Cayenne, and it was scored all to hell. It was bad. And it wasn't very long after that his whole channel was taken down. So I'm sure that what was originally positive when he started, and it was the same thing. He was getting misfires, and it was a tick in which first he was thinking, well, maybe it's the direct injection, the direct fuel injectors making the noise. But then when he
Well,
started probing
they
it, then he
do.
realized it wasn't coming from there. It was coming from deeper down into the cylinder head. And so he's like, uh-oh. So he pulled the plug and scoped it. Sure enough, it was all scratched up. It was bad.
Yeah. Well, and bore scoring, obviously is something that DFI injectors can have that sound. A loose spark plug can have that sound until it gets bad. But the one thing that you just don't see is lifters causing the noise, but they have the rhythmic tone and the right rhythm of a bad lifter. And it fooled me the very first time. It fooled me. But now, if somebody calls me and says I've got a lifter making a noise, boom, dude, no, you don't. I've had one bad set of lifters since about 2009. That's it. And a friend of ours, John Herzler, RS Motorworks in Atlanta, Alpharetta, actually, he just had a 991 come in, and I was talking to him about it. And he actually did find that it had 6 bad exhaust lifters, and we would have swore it had bore scoring, but that one actually did have bad lifters. And I told him, I was like, even though you found those bad lifters, do not trust them. Go ahead and scope those cylinders from the bottom side while you got it out of the car. Don't think that you've just got one problem, because you might not. You may have a compound issue. You might have thought you found the problem, but you got to quantify and make sure that you found the problem. But we can sit here and talk all night about bore scoring.
Oh,
but,
honestly,
we'll see it. We'll see if his engine has it when we get it apart. It probably at least has lost the skirt coating, which is stage 1 of bore scoring. If it loses the skirt coating on the pistons, it's going to end up scoring the bores, because then you've got an aluminum piston against an aluminum silicon cylinder, alusil cylinder, Locasil cylinder, whatever it is, whatever generation you are. But you're metal to metal with no dissimilar wear material between the two. And once that flakes off, that dissimilar wear material flakes off, you're going to have bore scoring happen from that point. And we've even found some of these blocks, and you're going to see this when PCA releases that bore scoring series. We've seen blocks that were destined to die because down at the bottom of the cylinders, where it never had a piston run against the surface, never had a ring touch it, the surface finish was wrong. Measuring it a millionth of an inch, putting it under Mark Malberg's crazy, super sensitive microscopes, and looking at those surfaces with crazy trace boss equipment that he's got from a digital metrology standpoint. It was determined with some of these blocks that he saw at LN, it was going to fail no matter how it was serviced, no matter how it was driven, no matter if the piston fell first or not. The surface finish of that cylinder was wrong from the factory. And because no piston had ever touched it in those areas, it was very clear to see that. So that's going to open a lot of eyes to this, about what has caused this. And there's different things that cause it. A lot of different causes, a lot of different effects. At the end of the day, it costs the same amount to make sure it's not going to happen again.
Well, I was really impressed, honestly. I've been down to the Porsche dealerships in Atlanta and watch them. And, they use the scanners and the diagnostic stuff a lot. But I was really impressed. This guy had an old school mechanic's ears and started just probing around. And it's like, dude, all that technology he has access to, and he's just using old school stuff. And he homed in on it, and then he pulled the plug and put the camera down in there. Okay. And I'm thinking, dang, I wonder if he watched our video.
All this technology, it's still gasoline in a spark plug.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I mean that. And the thing is, sometimes guys that use all these scan tools and all these diagnostic methods, they can't work their way out of a cardboard box with a sledgehammer. I've said it before. To the modern technician, if it doesn't have a diagnostic trouble code, they can't figure it out because they're not mechanics. They don't want to be called mechanic because they think it's a derogatory term. However, they should aspire to be a mechanic as well as a technician. There is a big difference. In the world of racing, you don't hear about a racing technician. They're still racing mechanics. And I don't consider mechanic to be a derogatory term like a lot of people do. But we are very much mechanical, much more than we are technicians.
I got another question here too.
Mm-hmm.
Mike Phillips, are we just waiting for bore scoring to happen to our M96 engine? And I'll jump in here and just say, it's not all M96 engines. You got to know which ones that are more prone to cylinder bore scoring. Jake, do you want to elaborate? Because I don't know if this guy is a Boxster owner. I don't know if he's a Carrera owner. But I would think that if you're a Carrera owner, you need to keep this on the radar.
Well, this is the thing I'll say, and do not take this wrong. But if you are the guy that drew the lottery and one of your 6 cylinders is like some of the cylinders that Mark Malberg measured at LN Engineering when they were there doing the studies with all of his crazy equipment that nobody else has. If you got that cylinder, you are waiting for it to happen. There is not a damn thing that you can do to keep it from happening because it was a birth defect. It's just like my daughter was born with a spinal birth defect that she's having surgery for on Monday. And she had surgery for it when she was 1 day old, 2 days old. But it's a birth defect of the engine. And in that case, you're waiting for it to be a problem. Just like some people are born with birth defects that affect their heart and they don't know about it till later in life. They were born with it. It's going to impact their life in some way. So if you're that guy, yeah, you got it. Is everybody that guy? No. But you could change the oil. You could do anything you want to. You could drive the thing as much as you want or as little as you want. If that surface finish was wrong from the factory, it does not have the proper surface finish to last as long as the other cylinders would. And some of those blocks, every cylinder was bad.
Well, and I'll jump in here and say, when you say M96, for example, Jake and I were just talking about these again, the turbo engine, the GT2 and the GT3 have Nicosil plated cylinders and they're not prone to cylinder bore scoring.
No, well, the reason we use Nicosil, I mean, all the good engine programs in this world that are respected in this industry use Nicosil. The guys that use iron are all about getting an engine done quick and cheap, period. I don't care what they say. That's what leads to it. They don't want a job to sit their shop very long. They would rather compromise something and put an iron sleeve in it that's probably going to slip and move or not wear well or sound like a small diesel or whatever the case may be. But everybody who's respected and has earned respect uses Nicosil.
Well, he has a 99 Carrera, so a
Okay.
Mark 1 5-chain.
So it's probably less apt to do it, but that engine also, if it was built in 98 or not, could have had other issues. That era is the era where the factory burned down. Right? So if you go to the December 08 issue of Excellence magazine, Jim Pasha first really went over our engine program in that technical series in that magazine, and he talked about the factory burning down that at Covenschmidt that made the blocks and how Porsche had to put engines in brand new cars that had been fixed because they did not have brand new blocks because the factory burned. So they took a bunch of blocks that needed repairs and they repaired them and kept the assembly line going. A lot of those didn't make it any time at all. They failed early. And there was reports where some of them were failing like 100 at a month were being replaced. And that was something Tony Callis had posted to me when we were doing classes together from a dealer perspective. But almost all of those that had a problem already failed, right? They failed early on because they were big problems and they did manifest really fast. So now 99s or something, we don't really see that they score because those pistons basically had the best skirt coating on them. The later pistons had like a plastic film that was that had a ferroprint, and they were some of the worst. But don't get me wrong, you could have a 99 that had a bad surface finish and it could have the good pistons with a good skirt coating on them and it's still going to fail, right? But that the M9603 from the 3.6 on up, that's the ones that have the biggest problems. And if you want a car that is never going to score bores, I seriously have not ever seen an early Boxster score bores. They have different pistons in them, and they're a cast piston. They use a different surface finish as far as the skirt coating goes. Everything's different. And they do not score bores. I'm talking, all the way up. The Boxster really didn't start to score bores till 07 when it got the same engine as the Cayman S, the M9721 in 07 and 08. Till then, it's absolutely unheard of. I have hundreds of Boxster pistons, and they all look perfect. Boxster blocks. Yeah, the cylinders will go out around, and they need to be sleeved with Nicosil, and they need the cylinders replaced because they go out around, but they do not score. It just doesn't happen.
And I'll just jump in here and say too, for those that like the 987, the base 2.7 is the engine you want. I know people say, "Oh, less power," but those
They
are
don't break. I'm telling you, the
don't score either.
2.7, any generation of the 2.7 just doesn't break. And we get like one phone call a year from a guy that has a 2.7 base Boxster engine that failed. That's it. And it was that way when those cars were newer. But they are the absolute best engine. I was talking to Lee Jenkins at Hardtech. We share stuff back and forth all the time. Even though we're competitors, we still share notes, and we're very friendly competitors, and we help people. And he's like, yeah, man, we don't see 2.7s fail in the UK either. It just doesn't happen. It's the best combination. And the weird thing is, it's a bastard. If you look at it, it's got the 78 stroke of like a 3.4 996 would have, or a 3.2 Boxster S would have. And then it's got an 85 millimeter bore size, which was basically the bore size of the 2.5 Boxster. And he kept that all the way through the end of 08 with the base model cars. So, it's a real smorgasbord of what they used and everything else, but it's the best engine. The only thing that takes them out is seriously an IMS bearing. That's it. Nothing else takes those engines out. And we used to build those for Grand Am because that was the engine that Grand Am basically had, brought into the program where, if you wanted to race a Cayman or a Boxster in Grand Am, whatever it was, according to what generation it was, that was the engine that we used. And we would buy brand new ones and take them straight apart. And they just, even tracking them 3 hours at a time in endurance racing with no oil starvation bolt-ons at all. You give them some extra bearing clearance and they wouldn't fail. So,
David's got a question. David Pickering. He says, does the higher mileage cars play any role in bore scoring?
No. Nope. I mean, we see cars with 15, 18,000 miles on them. Bobby, that GT4 that I sent you the message about, that guy, he had 31,000, I believe.
Oh.
Never took it to the track. Bore scoring is not prejudiced at all. It doesn't matter what oil you've used. It doesn't matter what fuel you've used. If you're going to have it, you're going to have it. Especially,
but as a general rule,
blocks.
It's good to exercise these cars regular. It's good to be driving them instead of parking them in the garage and walking out to the garage and looking at them and blow them a kiss. It's actually good to actually get it out of the garage. When you say, Sean, we need to drive these things instead of,
oh yeah,
I mean, that breaks my heart to know these people that are 20,000 mile cars sitting in the garage and no telling what's going on inside. We got in a big debate over oil today, oil debates. What can you do? And the whole debate was over, should you change the oil before you put these cars in storage? Now, I am no oil specialist, but the guys that I have listened to, Lake Speed Jr., would advise that people that have the M9X generation of engines, if you don't drive it during the winter months, it's good to get the oil that you've been using through the driving months out of there and put fresh oil, let it circulate, put it in storage, and then when you get it out of storage, drive it, and as soon as possible, put fresh oil. And I'm sure Jake has a more stricter guidelines for his engines, but that's what I remember. But it's like, why would you need to do that? How can oil go bad just sitting?
Well,
in an engine.
Well, that's you have had to understand that. You've had to gather the data, and you've had to need to support these cars when they come out of storage. I hate storage. I urge everybody to drive the car, no matter what kind of scenario you've got as far as your operating environment. You're going to have at least 1 or 2 dry days or a week of dry days cumulative across the winter. Find that dry day and take the car out and let it stretch its legs some. That is what I tell people all the time, because in March, April, May, when these cars start coming out of storage, when you've built a couple thousand engines for these cars and you've got people going back for years and years, you start getting the messages. I took my car out of storage and you learn that storage is evil. And we've been able to do the studies over time. And I've actually had some scenarios where I would have customers across the country that I would say, hey, I don't want you to store your car this year unless you absolutely have to. I want to send you some oil for free, put it in the car, and let's run it. I would find another customer that really needed to store his car, and I would say, okay, I'm going to send you some oil. I want you to run this oil and then store the car, and then don't change it after storage. And I want to get a sample. I do the same thing with another customer. Say, look, run this oil, store the car, and then change the oil right after it comes out of storage. I did this for like 5 years, and I gathered the information. And you look at the oxidation levels, you look at everything about the oil, the viscosity, the fuel intrusion, you look at everything about it. And the cars that were stored and had oil setting in them during storage, and that oil was not changed right afterwards, always look better. Always look worse. And then you have the situations where guys would change the oil before storage and then almost immediately after with just a couple of 100 miles, and those were the best over and over and over again. But the guys that exercised the car over the winter was the best of all because they kept the thing exercised. So I do work for Mr. Collier, Miles Collier at Revs Institute, and they have over 100 cars that are on display there of all kinds. The first 550 Spider, I mean, you name it. And I was talking to Scott today, the curator there, and they have a massive protocol for exercising their cars. I mean, they go out and exercise 917s, 910s, 908s, the first 550 Spider, McLaren F1s. Everything that is in Revs is not just a museum. It is a automotive research facility. So everything there gets raced. They take these cars out and race them. They take these cars out and exercise them at the airport next door. And so they'll take a car out, they change fluids, they exercise it, they put it back in the gallery, whatever it is. It is a never-ending, non-stop protocol to keep these cars healthy. And they know if the car sits there and it doesn't get operated and it doesn't have the oils changed and it doesn't have anything, the car goes to hell. I've got 5 cars in a museum right now in North Georgia. And I went up there 2-3 weeks ago and I cranked all my stuff up and checked it all out, and it was all good. But I need to go rotate those cars out, bring them home, service them, drive them, and then give him a few more cars. So I practice what I preach for that. But it's important that you keep oil and fluid circulated in any machine. Doesn't matter if it's a car or not.
Sounds good. Well, we're coming up on the 2-hour mark, and I just want to thank everybody out there that have tuned in to RenVision tonight. And please subscribe. It's free. And all that's going to do is we're not going to come after you. Nobody from Google trying to hunt you down. All it's going to do is give you notifications. So when we go live, it'll alert you on new content. So everybody says that has a YouTube channel, like and subscribe, but it is important. And if you really like us, you can become a member and to get access to a lot of Jake's exclusive videos that are not available to the general audience. So Jake, if you don't have anything else, so you want to wrap this thing up?
Yeah. So Sean, there's just one more question. What about this process would you change if there was anything that needed to be changed? I mean, and I'm asking you honestly because you were a beta tester. Anybody that was going to push that button first was going to be the beta tester. What do you think we can do to make this better?
That's tough. I mean, I think the process is awesome. The fact that, and I don't know if you plan to do any of this. I'm assuming you're not going to as you ramp up to 2 or 3 engines a month, but the videos you did, videos as the engine was coming along, those were phenomenal. Being able to see it coming together, see what was going into it. I honestly can't think of anything that I would change about the process. It was really easy. Obviously you have to have your finances ready to go, because it's not a small purchase, but it was a great process. I mean, there's nothing I can really think of. And again, the team at LN, immediately, within a couple hours after I put my deposit down and got my confirmation, I was contacted by them, and we took care of everything we needed to. I can't think of anything I'd change. It was really good.
There's at least one guy out there screaming, make it free, give away.
Well, I'm sure the 3 or 4 guys I know that really wanted that engine, I'm sure they probably would like some things changed. Because
I know. Everybody driving around faster, worried about this. That's the problem with these failures, that they really do, in some ways, kind of steal the joy. I guess that's the bad thing. It's kind of like when you go to the doctor, you really don't want to hear what the doctor has to say. You just kind of want to just hope everything's good. But when you say, well, we got this, please don't tell me. You know what I mean? And it's like when I had the car with the 6204 bearing that was so bad, I couldn't stop thinking about it, because I knew I had read accounts enough to say, I really need to be smart about this thing and get this bearing out of here and get a fresh, the IMS solution in this car. And eventually that's what I did. And I miss that car, by the way. For the record, I do miss that car. And that car is, I won't get into that car, because the person that owns that car now probably listening.
But I was going to say, Bobby, the way that you ended up with your car is like failure is opportunity. You're Cayman, right? So, I mean, because a shop misdiagnosed it as having an engine failure, and then the car came to me, and then the guy had given up on it and didn't want to fix it. And I diagnosed that it actually just had a bad air oil separator, and the other shop tested that and said that the air oil separator was good.
I was talking about,
but they didn't use it in a proper manner. So then I do a quick test, bypass the air oil separator, block it off where it's out of the equation, whether it's failed or not. It's smoking like a freight train. I drive the car 5 miles, the smoke clears up. I bring it back, throw a manometer on the crankcase, hook the AOS back up, prove that it's wrong or bad. We throw an AOS on it, and you've been driving the car, for 3 years? Something like that? 2.5?
So, Sean, I'm a glutton for punishment, man. I was talking about the 2002 996.
I know, but I was just trying to explain while we were talking about failure as opportunity.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
How you ended up with a car, and it's because a shop that was actually a specific Porsche shop misdiagnosed one of the biggest things that happens to these engines, and a guy lost his car over it, and then Bobby ended up with it.
Well, the thing is you love these cars so much for what they do well, right? But you can't help but say, gosh, when these little nitpicky things that go on. We joked last time we had I think maybe when we had our group meeting here on Zoom, we were joking about all the little things that go, like the key fobs. It just drives you nuts. It's like, why can't they make a decent key fob? You know what I mean? $500, give me a break, a little plastic thing. And it's such a common problem. It drives me nuts. So it's little things like that. That's where the old air coolers are nice. But when they're working, they're really great cars. They really are. There's nothing that can bring a smile. I mean, when you come, I grew up in the South, so it's all muscle cars. So when you drive one of these things for the first time, you really get a feel of what the design is all about and the experience is all about. So I totally get it, wanting to make it the very best, Sean, that you can make it, so that you'll have to enjoy this car for as long as you can. And then again, if you get something else, more power to you. Put that engine in the next vehicle, and you'll be good. I think that I'm kind of the Cayman is automatic. I think that when I say that I missed the 2002, it was a fully manual car. It didn't have traction control, none of that stuff. My 03 996 had all the Porsche stabilization and stuff, and I got to 2002, Sean. I almost lost control of it, and unfortunately, I sold it to a really nice guy that ended up having an accident in that car. And I don't know if it's because that he maybe was expecting traction control or something, but I almost lost it too because I was going around the corner a little too hard and it started swinging around on me. And I was like, uh-oh, doing this number. I was like, goodness gracious, scared the fool out of me. But anyway, thank you so much, Jake, and thank you, Sean. Unless there's anything else you want to talk about. But it's funny though that like with the AOS, we do a whole other RENNCAST on the AOS and all that because it's such another common thing that people fight, the smoke, and then they don't realize. I mean, a lot of times they think it's something else, and then they don't even know how to use a manometer. But we've done a video on that anyway. By the way, for those that want to see, you can go on our channel, and we've done a whole thing on how to test your the health of your AOS. But Jake, thank you, man. Is there anything else that you want to talk about before we?
No, that's it. I just want to say that 27 FSI 2799. I'm doing videos tomorrow, just like what Sean was talking about. We're in the process of prepping that one, getting everything vapor honed and cleaned up. It'll be spotless and spick and span all the way around, and then ultrasonically cleaned. So I'm going to start doing videos tomorrow. So anybody that's on that M9605, the 05 to 08 base 997 notification list, not wait list, but notification list, will start getting videos probably tomorrow or Monday about this next engine, and it'll be done in 2 weeks, something like that. So if you guys are on that wait list, or if you want to be part of that notification list, then go ahead and send a message at flat6innovations.com, and Judd will send you an application, which is the first way to start the process. And then, we'll let you jump in the Shark Tank.
Hey, Sean, I got a prescription for you, buddy, because my first 996 was a Cabriolet. They were really fun, by the way. My prescription is you take your wife for a date when it gets warm in the springtime. You take her take us for a ride in the mountains. Now, don't tear it up, because you don't want to lose your wife on this deal, right? You got to keep her plugged in and happy about the Porsche thing. You don't want to make her sick. Take her up to the mountains, take her out to eat, and enjoy life. Okay, brother?
Yeah, I live in Central Ohio, so not much in mountain option, but
well, whatever you can find.
Well, and she gets motion sickness. She gets motion sickness anyway, right? So, yeah, and my wife gets that too. And luckily my daughter doesn't. She can do anything. We ride all kinds of stuff together. It doesn't bother her. I was afraid she was going to end up with that freight, but that's miserable.
Well, that's actually
my wife can drive manual. That's why I'm going to get myself back into it. Probably a manual car if I can find one, because she can actually drive the manual. Can your wife drive manual, Sean?
Oh yeah, she can.
I mean, we're still they're like the last generation of women probably that can.
Well, my daughter is 11. She can drive a manual.
Actually,
it's all about funny. Passing it down,
It's funny though. You did remind me of one other thing that I found very interesting about this engine. So, tail end of last year, I think it was about August of last year, I put a set of Soul headers and Soul cats on it, but I've still got the stock mufflers, so it's quiet when you're off the throttle, but it's it's got a pretty good growl when you're on hard acceleration. My daughter actually didn't like the car after I put the catalytic converters on it when I was accelerating hard, because she said she didn't like the sound. And the one thing I've noticed, and I don't know if it's the way it flows through the heads now or what it is, but actually the exhaust growl, even at hard acceleration, is a little different. It's not as harsh.
Well, it's funny because my girls, when they were little, they loved the sports exhaust, man. Yeah. When it would kick in, they would it's like being on a roller coaster for them. Their hands up, woo! They just loved it.
Well, but that's the way I was going to say, that's the way my daughter is in the 500E, because that car it's very docile until it really comes on, and then it screams and it's quiet. But I put a different set of exhaust and stuff on it. That car is a beast. That's a whole nother. But the reason, Sean, that it does that is because of the cam timing. So I don't use stock cam timing. So it takes away some of that, I call it blustery type of a trait of the exhaust, where it just doesn't sound refined. So changing the cam timing and not doing the standard protocol helps with that. And it also helps with power. People that just throw cam timing tools in these things and they set it the way the factory does, I usually set them up a little retarded. And We don't put much lead into the intake. We set the exhaust up a little on the retarded side. And that's something I've been doing for a little while now. And I did it with that engine. And man, I tell you, it really wakes them up. And it, like you said, it changes the exhaust note. It changes the exhaust note on the dyno too. We can tell that, especially above 5,000 RPM. You can really tell that exhaust note doesn't have that same trait anymore.
I think that's one thing we have over the air-cooled ones.
Man, I tell you, you get up to a Varioram 993 and they scream too. They really do. And those big 2-valve heads start to flow and they start putting on the power. They can make as much power as these engines do. I mean, it's I'm doing actually for Abe Schlott right now, I'm doing a 4.1 liter 993 based engine for a 904 replica, which this would be like the 6th engine I've done for Abe, but it's an animal. And the last one of those I did made 446 horsepower at like 7,400 RPM. Because it's all lungs,
It's just almost impossible for me to find an air-cooled car. But of course, I've been going through hell in the last year with my kids having accidents and stuff. So all my liquid cash is out the door. That's a whole nother story. But I guess one of my bucket items would be to own one of those air-cooled cars just for a while, enjoy it.
Me too. I'd like to have a 993, but prices are so insane.
Oh, no,
now.
it's just outrageous. I mean, you could find a lot of those. It was just, I guess, there was a time where people were dumping them on the market. Now, I don't see anything. You could find the Targas for nothing, the air-cooled Targas. But now even those are
the tide brings it all up, and I actually sold all of mine. My 88 Carrera, which is the one I was going to keep forever. I've had that car for years and, I just didn't drive it anymore. I mean, I like military vehicles. I like weird stuff. I don't really want to go to Porsche events anymore. And I bought a chunk of property and I spend all my time on my property running a bulldozer and hunting and things like that. So I don't really care about events anymore. I haven't been to Cars and Coffee since before COVID, man. So, I
haven't been either.
I
want to get back. They stopped doing them, but now they're starting to do them again.
It's Saturday actually, but I don't care anything about going. I was like, I might go, but I need to work on my freaking bulldozer. But anyway, I sold the 88 to one of our customers because he really wanted it. And he actually has a R43 powered 997. So he's got the same car as yours, Sean, but with a R43 in it that made like 470 in that neighborhood. So it's an animal. And he's in Southern California. He drives that car every day, by the way, even in SoCal traffic with a R43 and a heavy clutch. He still drives that car. But, I said, I'm thinking about selling my 88. I put it on the owners group and he messaged me and a couple other guys messaged me. And then I went through that period where I don't know if I want to sell it. And I was like, the hell with it. I would rather have the space empty in the building to put a World War II vehicle. And that's what I did. So I'm actually shipping it out to him next week. And it'll be kind of hard to see
life
that
is too short not to do what you enjoy,
Yeah. And I mean, my time with those cars kind of come and gone. I kept my 912E, which was my very first, 911-ish car. Before that, all the Porsches I had were 914s. So that 912E, I've had that car for 27 years or 26 years or something like that now. And I'll keep that one forever. It's got the original
just a beautiful
paint on it
car.
still.
I mean,
And
I've looked at the 912s a lot. You just don't see them that look like that with the sunroof and the white and the condition.
Mine's an E, so it's a whole different car. It's 76, 1 year car, 1 year only. It's got a 914 engine in it from the factory, basically. So, but that was my test car, and I put 160,000 miles on it in like 9 years, and I drove the snot out of it. And you'd never know it because it still looks like a new car in many ways. It's never been restored. And then, of course, my 356, which is just an animal. So those are the two I decided to keep. And then the other ones I sold. I had a 964. I sold that. Then I sold the 993 to another one of our customers. And then I sold the 88. And I sold all those in about a 2-year period, So, but, and then the fellow that bought the 993 was actually my wife's car. And it was a Tiptronic. And he loves it. I built a 3.9 liter for it. I call it an R39. and it's a screamer. I mean, that thing, even being in a Tiptronic, I mean, that thing just it rips, and it actually loves it because it's got that. It's only a 4-speed automatic, but it's got really tall gearing. So you give that thing a really broad, flat torque curve, and it just pulls forever. It never stops pulling. And Steve Wong did me a tune for it, and it was a screamer. And Cordell's been driving that car a lot, all up and down the West Coast. So,
well, it surprises me, and I mean, it seems like with the 996, like with the turbo cars, the fully manual, the true manual was phased out. Now the 991 and 992, I don't even know if they do a turbo and a manual. I don't think they do, but I am, not 100%. It's almost like automatics are the way things are moving, and I've read several articles. That's where the demand is. So it's like the true manual cars are a very small percentage.
Think about how many people can't drive a stick.
Yeah. So
and a lot of people are not proficient.
And I get it. I get it. And some people physically can't,
Well, if you're in LA or if you're in freaking New York or even in Atlanta, driving a stick sucks. It sucks because there's nothing worse than bumper to bumper traffic than sitting there on and off the clutch.
And if you have, like, I think, Sean, you said you had some knee surgery. Is that correct?
I'm probably going to have to at some point. Unfortunately, it's not my clutch foot. So.
Yeah, I'm just saying that people that have gone through knee surgery and hip surgery, they just have to give up the manual cars because of pushing that clutch. It's painful. So they end up getting, an automatic, which, I mean, they're still fun. I mean, but it's less, I guess if I was to give it a word, it would be less engaging because you're using less of yourself. You feel like you don't have total control over the engine, even though with the paddle shifters, I mean, you can get some of that sense. But if the governors kick in, I've had cars at paddle shifters and you didn't shift it just right, it'd shift for you. It's like, what the heck? So, I mean, being in a true manual car, that's one of the great things. You feel like you have the total control over that engine, and you feel more engaged with the machine. And so it's kind of sad to see that's kind of weird things. But heck, we'll all be in Teslas before long.
I was going to say that's better than a friggin' electric car. And I think electric cars have their own place, again, if you're in some urban area or whatever, and you're not driving a lot, you're not going on long trips. Hey, an electric car is okay if the power grid can support it. That's another whole day.
Oh no.
So it is funny. It's funny because I was listening to the electric car chat at the last one. So I changed jobs last year, and first time ever in my career, job comes with a company car, and my company car is a Tesla Model Y, and so it's been interesting. I mean, I that thing's a great appliance. It's great when the weather's mediocre for driving back and forth to the office. I said it's like driving an iPhone, but it is fun, the difference between driving that and then getting in the 997 and driving, because it is a whole different experience. I mean, again, lots of torque, endless torque, but it's just not the same.
My first dirt bike was a Honda-matic. Jake knows all about this.
Oh yeah, I got one. Yeah, 2-speed, man. And I would really, where I was riding at, I could hardly get it to go into second gear unless I went out on the road, and I wasn't supposed to be riding in the road because I didn't have a helmet. I mean, helmet in the 80s, man. Who the hell was wearing a helmet in the 80s? But I mean, I'm riding 3-wheelers, a 250R, no helmet. I mean, but the Honda-matic thing, it was a challenge for me to get it to shift into second gear, into high, but that's like a CVT. And so many cars today have a constantly variable transmission that, it's like you're driving a freaking car that's powered by a rubber band. I mean, it just, the faster it goes, and you don't ever feel it shift because it really doesn't shift. But I don't care anything about those, but like the 993 Tiptronic, people talk crap about those, and in stock form, I didn't like it. But when I got that car, my wife obviously could drive a stick because she was racing the 996 and she's got 5-lane speed records, and it was a manual. But she's got bad veins in her left leg, and they're
Yeah.
it's not good to drive a clutch all the time with that because she just fights it. It's almost like a bit of a handicap with that left leg in some cases. And in the clutch, especially in a 993, they're pretty heavy. I was like, hey, this automatic, the Tiptronic, could be cool for her. And in stock form, it sucked. But when we built the big engine for it, man, it would scream. I mean, and I
Yeah.
had the transmission rebuilt. And they actually did a few changes to the valve body and stuff, and it would hold in gear longer and it
Yeah.
would shift harder. And man, Ericsson Enterprises did that. They do a lot of Mercedes gearboxes, which is basically what that is. And man, it did a great job, and Cordell likes it. I mean, now he put a cool steering wheel in it and stuff, and he likes driving it better than a manual. He's got a manual 964 Targa. He likes driving that better than the manual car.
They're very,
one is
like
because
you
it's
say,
got 50 horsepower more, but still.
if you're driving in city, they're great cars. But just my personal opinion, if I had to choose between the paddle shifters and the Tiptronic buttons, paddle shifters.
Well, he put paddle shifters on it. He did a special steering wheel with paddle shifters, so it's working really cool. He did a lot more to that car. I mean, when I sold it to him, it was in pretty much stock form except for the transmission and engine, but he's taken it to the next level, and he loves it. So now he wants me to build the same engine for his 964 Targa. So,
oh yeah, I mean, I get it. I mean, these kids. I mean, this generation, if you ask them about manual, they'll immediately say the things that they don't know what sad. The generation needs to be taught better.
There's no greater joy than a good double clutch downshift.
Oh, exactly. And the new automatic cars will do all that. When you're down on the paddle,
it's just not the same.
It's of course, doing it again, you're engaged with the manual car doing it. Once you get the hang of that, it's pretty cool because you're doing more of yourself, and so you feel like you're part of the process. So, all right, Jake, I think it's about time to wrap it up. And again, thank you everybody that is watching us on YouTube. I'm going to go ahead and stop the feed, guys. But thank you so much for watching, and I hope that we're going to try to do these every week. At least that's kind of the tentative plan. And so, kind of tune in here on RenVision at 8 o'clock.